Okay, we're looking at metaphors of God the Father. Looked last week at the fact that He is our refuge, indicative of storm, danger, and need. And under that heading, we see there are several other metaphors which enhances the meaning of refuge. He's a fortress. Fortresses were generally on high ground, providing very good sight lines. And again, when the Lord is our fortress, we see more clearly. It's a place of protection, just like a refuge. It's also a place of provision, a fortress. Then we looked at Him as our hiding place, which again enhances the meaning of a refuge, and that would emphasize the safety that is in the Lord. And the psalmist asked God to hide him several different times, and he also fled to be hid. Psalm 143, verse 9. And that's what we are to do. So, again, continuing, God is a refuge. As such, He is our stronghold. Notice in the book of Nahum, chapter 1, Nahum, chapter 1, verse 7. The Lord is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble, and He knoweth them that trusteth in Him. So the Lord, in His goodness, is a stronghold in the day of trouble. He knoweth them that trust Him, which teaches us that we are to trust the stronghold. Again, the image also enhances the idea of a refuge. Here it would emphasize strength and safety of the refuge. It is protection in the omnipotence of God, or it is a protection in the strength, the power of God. He's a stronghold. The idea is that we are held in His strength. So much so that He is our strength. Notice in Psalm 28, again, held in His strength, so much so that He is our strength. Psalm 28, verse 8, the Lord is their strength. Then he goes further with this, and He is the saving strength of His anointed. So the Lord is their strength, and He is their saving strength, or delivering strength, or the strength that delivers. Psalm 31, verse 4. Pull me out of the net that they have laid privately for me, for Thou art my strength. Again, God is our strength. Psalm 37, verses 39 and 40. But the salvation of the righteous, the deliverance of the righteous is of the Lord. He is their strength in the time of trouble. And the Lord shall help them and deliver them. He shall deliver them from the wicked and save them because they trust Him. Again, a refuge is a place of trust. You have to trust the refuge. When you trust the refuge, you flee to the refuge. When you trust God has a stronghold, you flee to that. The reason people do not flee to God is because, again, the problem is a lack of trust. In Jeremiah 16, and let's read the 19th verse. O Lord, my strength and my fortress, He is my strength as my fortress, and my refuge in the day of affliction. The Gentiles shall come unto thee from the ends of the earth, and shall say, Surely our fathers hath inherited lies, vanity, and things wherein there is no profit. Again, the Lord is our strength. Then notice in the book of Joel, chapter 3, verse 16. The Lord also shall roar out of Zion, and utter His voice from Jerusalem, and the heavens and the earth shall shake, but the Lord will be the hope of His people, and the strength of the children of Israel. So He's our stronghold. So much so that He is our strength. It's not just that God strengthens. He does. But it's more than that. It is, He is our strength. The truth is, we are strengthened when we realize and when we trust that He is our strength. That's what strengthens us. So it's much more than God just strengthening us. He is our strength. So our strength is Him. So He's a stronghold. That is, we're held in His strength. Also, the Lord's way is a stronghold. Notice in Proverbs chapter 10. Proverbs chapter 10. Verse 29. The way of the Lord is strength to the upright. Following the way of God, one finds strength. You do not find strength going away from God. You find strength in the way of the Lord. So He is our refuge. As such, He is our fortress and our hiding place and our stronghold. Next, He is our strong tower. Notice in Psalm 61, and verse 3. For thou hast been a shelter for me, which takes the idea of a refuge, and a strong tower from the enemy. A place on high, a strong tower, above everything else. Proverbs chapter 18. Proverbs 18. Verse 10. The name of the Lord, which we've seen already in the past, that's everything God is. His name represents who He is. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous runneth into it and is safe. Again, He's our refuge. He's our safeguard. He is a strong tower. Also, He's our shield. He's our shield, which again enhances the idea of a refuge. He is referred to such many times. Notice in Genesis chapter 15. Genesis 15 and verse 1. He says, I am thy shield, an exceeding great reward. When he's referred to as our shield, a shield in Bible times, Old Testament, New Testament, was about 4 foot high, about 2 feet wide, and it was curved, wasn't flat, it was a curve to the shape of the body. So an individual could crouch behind the shield, not just holding it up, but he could crouch, they could place it in the ground and crouch behind the shield, forming a wall. And that shield, of course, could repel whatever was thrown against it. And the Lord says, I am thy shield. That is, I'm the one that you get behind me. You draw close to me. And the weapons of the enemy go to him, not us. That's the idea of this shield. In Deuteronomy chapter 33, Deuteronomy 33, verse 29. Deuteronomy 33, verse 29. Happy art thou, O Israel, who is like unto thee, O people saved by the Lord. The shield of thy help, the shield going back to the Lord, the shield of thy help. He's our shield. We see this also through the Psalms, that God is our shield. We'll not look at those verses, but he is our shield over and over and over again. Also, truth serves as a shield. We see that in Psalm 91 and verse 4. So God is our refuge. As such, he is our fortress. He is our hiding place. He is our stronghold. He is our strong tower. He is our shield. And all of those emblems give us the idea that we are to draw close to God. Every one of those metaphors should encourage us to draw near unto God. And they all paint a picture of the character of God, the availability of God, and that God, we have access to God. He is holy. He is almighty. He is sovereign. He is omnipresent. He is all-knowing. He is impeccable. And we have access to all of that. He is Redeemer. He is Savior, which speaks of the fact that he has an interest in us. He is there for our welfare. He is sustaining and all-sufficient. He's gracious. He's merciful. He's loving. And he is our refuge. And by that, again, we're encouraged to draw to him. He is a God that we can lean upon. He is a God that we can confide in. He is a God that we can trust. And has our refuge, or stronghold, or whatever you want to refer to him as, he's more than whatever the event is, whatever the circumstance, whatever the need may be. So all of that serves as an encouragement to flee to him. It's almost beyond belief how reluctant the average child of God is to flee to the Lord. He's usually the last resort. It's after they've tried everything else, so, well, we might as well try the Lord. He's never to be the last resort. He's to be the first. He's to be the first place we flee. That should be the first thought in our mind. I've got to get near to God. But that isn't the case in many individuals. So, in Him is strength. He is our strength. And when we flee to Him, we find strength. In Him is order. Everything's in order with God. You don't have chaos. We create chaos. In God, there's order. In God, there's peace. In Him is certainty. All around us is uncertainty. We find uncertainty. But He is certainty. So we're to draw near unto Him. In Him is calm. There's calmness. Once you get inside that refuge, there's a calmness. There's a great calmness that comes upon us. And there's light. Again, we're able to perceive things that we do not perceive outside of the refuge. But in that refuge, we see things. We see things in light of God. And therefore, we're comforted. And we find joy. And we find encouragement. There's not discouragement in the refuge. If you're discouraged, it's not because you're in the refuge of God. That's a place of encouragement. It's a place of courage. You don't have to work up courage. All you have to do is flee to God. And there it is. There's courage in that refuge. There's liberty. That's where true freedom is found. And we have access. We have access to God. He is, again, a refuge. He's a fortress. He's a hiding place. He's a stronghold. He's a strong tower. He's a shield. And all of that paints this picture of what is the possibility and opportunity of a child of God. We can live life near to God. Near to God. And every time God is referred to as a refuge, that is an encouragement that we can live life near to God. Near to God. Notice in Psalm 73, verse 28. I've preached weeks of revival services on this first phrase. But it is good for me to draw near to God. That's always so. There is never a time when that is not so. It is good. It is good for me. It's good for everyone else also. But it's good for me to draw near to God. And when we see Him as our refuge, we will do just that. We will draw near to God. Song of Solomon, we read in chapter 1, verse 4, "Draw me, and we will run after thee." Draw me. That's a prayer. It's good for me to draw near to God. And we ought to pray, since many times our inclination is not to draw near to God. We need to pray for Him to draw us near to Himself. In James 4, verse 8, we see we're to draw nigh to God. And the devil will flee. He'll come back, and when he does, you draw near to God. You just keep getting closer and closer and closer. Near to God. That's a privilege and opportunity and possibility of every child of God. It is the best place to live life. And if we live life there, it will be an extraordinary life. It will be extraordinary. Again, every now and then a child of God will say, life stinks. They use other words as well. How sad. What you've just announced is you don't know how to live life. And you're living it wrong. Because life near to God is an extraordinary life. It is a wonderful life. Near to God is always beneficial. Always. It's always worthwhile. You look at who God is. It's reasonable. It makes sense to draw near to God. It's the best advice that you can give anybody. Draw near to God. It's what they need to hear. Doesn't matter what their situation is. They need to hear that. Draw near to God. It's always advisable. It's always right. Is it ever wrong to draw near to God? Is it ever not the right thing to do? It's always right. People say, well, I don't know what to do. Draw near to God. Draw near to God. It's always the best place to be. Always. It's a place of togetherness with God. It's a place of identification with God. Near to God, we have communion with God. We have interaction with God. No wonder it's good for me to draw near to God. It's where we experience a relationship with God. It's where a relationship with God is developed. Relationship with God's not developed far away from God, but near to God. Near to God is a place of greater knowledge of God and greater knowledge of self as well. You know, people say all the time, I know me. No, you probably don't. Most people are not very aware of who they are. They think they know, but they don't. But near to God, you know. Near to God is a place where holiness is developed. It's not where unholiness is developed. It's where faith is strengthened. Near to God. Someone says, I need more faith. Draw near to God. That takes faith. Yes, it does. Draw near to God. And faith is strengthened there. Whatever we lack spiritually, that's the answer. Draw near to God. It is the place where spiritual understanding is found. We understand things near to God. It's where our hearts become filled with gratitude. Our hearts don't become filled with gratitude away from God, but near to God. It's where praise is developed and passion, and it's where worship is found. You can't worship unless you're near to God. Near to God is what keeps the heart soft. You'll never develop a hard heart near to God. There won't be an impure heart near to God. There won't be an unwilling heart near to God. The heart is made willing near to God. Near to God is where our life is spared from wandering. You don't wander near to God. It's where your life is spared from emptiness. near to God. There's not emptiness near to God. There's fullness. It's good for me to draw near to God. It's where you avoid a life of defeat, is near to God. Again, the way people live their lives is an announcement of their relationship to the Lord. Whether or not they're near to God or far from God. Near to God is, again, you spare yourself a life of dysfunction. You don't become dysfunctional near to God. You become dysfunctional away from Him. Near to God, that's not going to lead to dysfunction. It's not going to lead to chaos and unrest. Near to God is where priorities are kept in order. People's priorities get out of whack when they wander from God. But near to God, priorities are where they ought to be. Keeps you from becoming entangled in the world. Keeps you from suffering spiritual loss. Near to God. Near to God is where divine enablement is found. It's where peace is found. It is where spiritual reviving is found. Near to God. Near to God. Again, James 4, verse 8, in the context of resisting Satan, the imperative is draw nigh to God. How do you fight Satan? Draw nigh to God. How do you overcome his wiles and his traps? Draw nigh to God. That's it. People want a 15-step program. One step, draw nigh to God. Draw nigh to God. Again, He's our refuge. He's our fortress. He's our stronghold. He's our high tower. He's our shield. That ought to encourage us to keep moving in the direction of God. And it ought to encourage us to plead, draw me, draw me. That's something He does on our behalf, relating to Himself. Draw me. Draw me. That's heartfelt. That's a passionate and fervent plea. Draw me. And when we have knowledge of ourselves, we will realize the importance of praying, draw me. Because many, many times we will not go in that direction unless He draws us. Unless He draws us. People will say, well, I'm not going to pray that because who knows what the Lord might do to draw me. Have some faith. Have some trust in who God is. And plead, draw me. And again, these metaphors that relate to Him as a refuge speak loud and clear for us to draw near to God. There are many, many, many more metaphors for God the Father, but we're going to stop there and then move on next week and look at a few metaphors of God the Son. Again, it's more, we're not looking at all the metaphors, there's many, but just some. Let's look to the Lord. Heavenly Father,